everybody, Creative Katie Karen Burchill here. Welcome to an art journal tutorial from the Break the Blank Page What Comes Next series. We will be featuring the technique reversing the stencil. So we're starting with a page that we broke in the initial Break the Blank page. And here we put modeling paste through this microbial stencil. Now, when I look at this, it looks like the stars, the Milky Way, and that was kind of my thinking. So I decided that I wanted to go like a black sky. I also knew that I'm going to want to bring out that texture at some point in time. So that's what's going to happen. And as soon as I thought of dark skies, I thought, you know what? I'm going to do the reversing the stencil technique. Now, I'm using black gesso. This is from the Crafter's Workshop. And I'll put a link to the TCW store. You can get a 5% discount if you shop through my link. Now I'm using the black gesso. You could use black paint. And as I'm thinking about this now, I could have used like a very dark navy here for my night sky. The way this page evolved, I think that would have looked good. But I like it with the black as well. So I'm using this black gesso, which goes on smooth like butter. I love TCW black gesso, and I'm giving that a good dry. Now this stencil is called Explosion, and I am placing it, I'm going to be putting white gesso through the stencil. Now this has open spaces, a big open space. That other one I showed you has smaller spaces. It wouldn't be as good. That leaf one, that works. So you want something with bigger open spaces. Now this white gesso, I've just put the gesso in a empty bottle just for ease of usability. I'm using a makeup sponge. I'm patting in, I'm kind of loading up the sponge. I don't want this wet and clumpy because that's going to lead to making it bleed through. Now I can see where the microbial modeling paste was, and I'm avoiding that, but trying to butt up as much to it as possible. And I'm going to build up the layers of gesso here. And I'm not overly concerned about getting it all exactly the same. It will lead to some variations when I do put color on this. So I'm coming back and I'll put one more layer, and I'm keeping the stencil in place because I want to keep it as lined up as possible. Now, because that microbial stencil that I put with modeling paste had circles, that also led me to the circles here. And I want a kind of starburst. That was kind of my thinking when I went into a space. And I'm going to want to line this up as close as possible later on. So I'm just taking a look of how I orientated this on here, because when I come back to do the next level, if I kind of know which way it goes, it will help me and it'll make it a lot easier. I'm using tape to tape this down just to get so it doesn't move. And I'm just repeating that process with white gesso, building up the opacity of it over time. I know we're tempted to go faster and get more on there, but typically when I try to do that, I regret it because the paint is too wet and it seeps underneath the stencil. This stencil has found its place on my table and I can't seem to be putting it back in my storage system. So I'm using it and using it again. It's really becoming a favorite. It's very organic looking and would be a good one if you're looking to add something that has high usability. You don't want to use a heat tool when the stencil's sitting on there. If I take the stencil off, I can. Now there's a little bit at the top and a little bit at the bottom where it didn't quite go all the way because, of course, the stencil was smaller. And I'm just going to piecemeal it and add a little bit in there just to fill it in. When all is said and done, it doesn't matter if it matches perfectly. So don't sweat the small stuff. The quote that I use on this says, "Impossible is just an opinion." And I think I apply that to art journaling. Can you do this? Yeah, now figure it out. There's always a way of making things work. You may have to adjust other techniques along the way. So I'm just giving this a good dry before I go to the next level. So now I'm going to take that same stencil and position it as close as I can over top of what I've already stenciled. And now I'm going to apply color. And I'm going to use colors that blend well because I'm going to overlap them. And I'm going to end up, even though I'm using 3 colors, I'm using yellow, green, and a turquoise, teal, and deep violet. So I'm using 3 colors, but where I overlap them, I get another 2 shades. And I'm starting with the lightest color in the middle and moving out to the darkest color. But you could do it the opposite way as well. And if you look at the color wheel, these colors are next to each other on the color wheel. That gives you a hint that those colors are going to blend pleasantly, give you something nice. You don't want to do this technique with colors that are across each other from the color wheel. So if you're choosing to do something similar to what I'm doing and want a similar effect, you don't want to do, colors across the wheel. So here I'm again starting with the lightest color closest to the black. And then I overlap with the turquoise teal color. And again, on the makeup sponge, I'm putting the paint on the sponge and patting it off on my glass tabletop. I bought glass to cover the entire tabletop, so it is basically a work area. I love it. And here's the deep violet. And I love the color the deep violet and that teal turquoise color makes. And these colors really pop against the black. But I think they would have popped equally well if I had chosen to do a dark, dark navy. There, I love it. And you can see some places there, the white is showing. I really like that. In fact, I kind of play that, I take that. So now I'm going to apply paint over the textured area and bring out that texture. So what I'm doing is I'm putting gold paint on a Ranger blending sponge and just rubbing lightly over top of it. And that's just bringing out that texture. And I go over it again and again just to bring it out. So we have kind of constellations or a Milky Way in the middle, and then we have this explosion of color on the outside. I'm edging it with gold. There, I'm just building up the gold a little bit more, very light touch. Get rid of some of the gold where I didn't want it, but you can see that shine. And here's my quote. My word of the year is possibility. And so I'm collecting quotes on possibility, and this is one of them. And I will be making a sentiment pack with this at some time. Here I'm trying to play up. I'm kind of making a white bubble around this. So I'm semi-fussy cutting this. And I like the font, and it seems to go well with that explosion stencil. Trying it this way, it doesn't quite fit. I could take my quote and shrink it if I wanted to. I'm toying with the idea of cutting this up a little bit, but just decided to leave it as is. And I'm going to use, because there's texture underneath, I'm not going to use my fluid medium. I'm going to use my TCW gel medium. Now the gel medium will dry clear, so you don't have to worry that it's going to be this whiteness. But I mean, I'm choosing matte finish because I don't want it to shine right where I put it and not across the whole page. Love this quote. Impossible is just an opinion. Now those makeup sponges, I just spray them with my Murphy's oil soap mixture and I throw them in my water and I clean them out and I use them again and again. Now I'm thinking of outlining, and instead of using my Sakura bold white, I grab my fine line bottle. I want a little bit bolder, and I'm going to go around it with white. I liked how the white was there, and now that I put the sentiment and there's white on that, I just really want to play up the white. This is far from perfect. I'm not even attempting it to be perfect. I turn it as I go. I did recently do a video on how to clean the fine line applicators and how I fill it, how I mix the paint. So you can go, I'll put a link to that in the top right hand corner. There's an eye. If you click on that, it should take you to that video. I love these fine line applicators. I have black paint, white, and gold. And I'm not, it's not perfect. It looks, when someone else is doing it and I watch people, it's like, oh, they are just so good at it. I wish I have the shakes. It's not perfect. But look at how that white is just adding brightness to the page. Is just, I think it really makes the page here. Now I'm switching to the other side. And you got to be careful. This paint, because you're putting down, it stays wet for a while. You do want to, you know, be aware and not put your wrist or your hand in it and smudge up your hard work. So I do at some point here stop and come back and give it a dry. Now I noticed, when I first put the tip down, there's kind of a drop. That tells me that the paint that I've mixed is a little bit too runny, too much water and stuff. I do in a little bit stop and add more paint to it to thicken it up. You shouldn't get that little drop. without having to put pressure, but you shouldn't have to squeeze hard with your hand either. So when you're mixing the paint, you need to, it's a bit of a trial and error. You see how it globbed right there? Here's where I just finally decide, okay, just add some more white paint. And I'm just using Liquitex Basics white paint. That's just in that container. I add it, give it a good shake, give it a little bit of time to come together. And you can see it's not seeping out. I do have to put a little bit of pressure, but I don't have that little glob right at the beginning like I was before. I hope that all made sense. We've got some shine, we've got the brightness, we've got bold colors, black and white contrast, the bright colors against the black background. So to recap, we started with modeling paste through a stencil. We are using the reverse the stencil technique. And in that, we're applying color using block and blend, and we were using an analogous color scheme, colors next to each other on the color wheel. We applied paint to textured areas to bring out that texture, and we outlined with the fine line applicator. Thank you for joining me. Give me a thumbs up. Share this video with your creative friends. Now go get creative.